Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. I'm Kristen Startup, and as a member of our Deloitte Human Capital practice, I have the privilege of working with so many of our great clients like Jackie Morgan and Sai Patel from Eaton Corporation, as well as my friend and partner Michael Polishin from SAP SuccessFactors. And we wanted to share a story today with you and tell you about the journey that Eaton has been on and how utilizing both the SAP SuccessFactors solution and Eightfold AI have really helped them modernize their talent acquisition experience at Eaton Corporation. Yeah. So Jackie and Sai, Michael, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's a privilege to be here with you.
Thank you.
Jackie, I'll start with you. Maybe if you could tell the group a little bit about Eaton and your role there, and then as we start the conversation, we'd love to hear a little bit about what business challenges were you thinking about when you set off on this journey?
Yeah, sure. Wonderful. Well, thank you for having us. So Jackie Morgan, I lead talent acquisition for Eaton. Eaton is a global power management company. We are about 90,000 employees in 60 countries, and our talent acquisition organization hires about 15,000 people a year. So we have about 170 recruiters and leaders of recruiting in about 30 countries supporting that volume every year. And it's a mix of internal and external hiring. And we also do a pretty good mix of what I'll say professional hiring as well as hourly and manufacturing hiring.
And Sai, could you say a little bit about your role at Eaton?
So I manage the HR technology area, anything that's related to people tools.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. And Michael, would you please tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your
I have
role?
responsibility for SuccessFactors for North America. I've been in the industry nearly 30 years. I'm out of Minneapolis. I'm super excited about the opportunity to learn a little bit from Eaton's journey and share with all of you. Certainly appreciative of the great partnership that we have with Eightfold. Thank you for having us.
No, thank you, Michael. Jackie, when we started out on this journey together a couple years ago, I know you were contemplating how you were going to modernize really the experience for talent acquisition at Eaton and the partnership between hiring managers and candidates and recruiters.
Yes.
Would you tell the group a little bit about the journey that you were on and what business outcomes were you seeking when you started?
Absolutely. So for us, the big challenge, and it's probably not dissimilar to what other organizations are facing, there's not enough supply of talent, right, for the demand at Eaton and at all companies. So we really became laser focused on improving a number of things, right? Our big kind of go-gets, if you will, we call them our North Star during the implementation. So the first thing was candidate experience, and really it kind of bled into the experience for everybody, right, in the environment. So candidates, hiring managers, and recruiters. And we really wanted to hyper-focus on a system, a program, and a technology that allowed a seamless kind of relationship and interaction between the recruiter, the candidate, and the hiring team. So that was kind of number one. The second thing for us was to really get around this challenge of identifying more talent, accelerating the identification of talent, and focusing in on skills. So for us, right, with 15,000 hires a year, manufacturing and professional, reviewing hundreds of thousands of resumes, you don't really know what you're looking at. So choosing a technology that also allowed us to laser focus in on the skills that would help us to build our workforce was probably the second most important thing that we were focused on, the big challenge for us.
And Sai, as you thought about this in partnership with Jackie and the business, what did you contemplate from a technology perspective? What were the challenges from a technology lens that you thought about as you started out on this journey?
So I started Eaton about 3.5 years ago. And when I got to Eaton, I took the whole people stack, the technology stack, put it on a board just to understand what we had. And we had probably 24 different products out there. Take that into a 5-year roadmap just to see when are the end of the contracts coming up. And surprisingly, man, we had tools from all over the place. Some would expire in February, some would expire in November, and they're part of the same family. So we spent a lot of time with the business saying, hey, look, 2 years from now, you have a bunch of stuff that's going to come and expire. And it might be time to start thinking about what is next gen for us. How do we take it out there? What are you looking for? It's hard to go out and make a case today when I still got 3 years more on the books with a product. But if we start thinking about it now, I can get you there in 2-3 years from it.
So Sai, piggybacking on that then, what was the first step? How did you begin the implementation journey? How did you settle on the complement of SAP SuccessFactors and Eightfold AI, and what did that implementation journey look like?
Oh my, that's an interesting one. So about 2 years ago, we started, the standard RFI, RFP part. We went out there, looked at about 5, 6 ATS vendors, started working through them, looked at them, and we're like, all right, they're out there in the market. You all know them. Eightfold was not one of them because they didn't fall under the ATS category, so they didn't pop up. So as we went through the journey, we're like, these are nice products out there, but they're not transforming our process in any way. They're still just automated workflows in a way. So we brought in a very trusted partner to give us a landscape of what is out there. And they were like, have you thought about Eightfold? We're like, nope. Who are these guys? I went to HR Tech 5 years ago. They were somewhere there in the corner, a little booth. What's happened over the pandemic? And they're like, we should check them out. So quickly, got a little team together, did some research on it. Fast forward a little bit, we ended up with Eightfold and SuccessFactors as a product.
Jackie, what would you share about the implementation journey from a business lens?
Yeah, so for us, or for me, right, really when we started this, it was about a year ago. And really, I think the core work of the implementation has really taken place in the last 9 months. The partnership has been, for us, the biggest, I think, advantage, right? The competitive intelligence that our Deloitte partners brought to us, the great partnership with Eightfold, their developers, their engineers, willing to hop on the call at any time, talk about bugs, fixes, things that we were trying to figure out. At the same time that we went through the technology implementation, we also took an opportunity to do like a laser focus on our whole TA program. So we went through a big exercise, an agile exercise with Cy and his team and my talent acquisition leadership team, and we looked at simplifying and modernizing the entire program. So, as we were going through the configurations, we would say, hey, we're going to do this, or we're going to try this. And Deloitte would say, no, you don't want to do that. Or they would say, yes, that's best in class. So, it was helpful to have that benchmark and the collaboration all along the way. It helped us make sure that we were not only implementing a technology that was going to help us advance our program, but that we were advancing the program itself at the same time.
And Michael, what are you seeing more broadly in the market these days as we think about the insertion of AI solutions more broadly in the market?
Yeah, certainly AI is part of every conversation that we're having, and thank goodness, because otherwise we'd be talking about Meghan Markle and her husband, and I don't know how much more of that we could stand. But everybody's trying to figure out, how do we deal with skills gaps? We've been talking about skills gaps for decades, but really reskilling internally and also acquiring talent, but certainly creating marketplaces and opportunities inside of organizations. How do you do that? The session right before this was a great example. Starbucks, my COO has responsibility for hundreds of millions of dollars here in North America from a business perspective. She was a barista at Starbucks, went on to work for Bain, et cetera. What a wonderful potential resource that Starbucks had. Loved the brand. Drink Starbucks several times a day, so still very loyal. But it was a missed opportunity. And we all have those pockets of missed opportunities. I think most customers are seeing that. And so they're trying to figure out how do they deal with that, because that skills gap is not going to go away. The other element of this, which I find really, really exciting, is the acceptance of a heterogeneous landscape, whether we're talking about ATS or we're talking about talent management, et cetera, the opportunity for technology companies to come together. The partnership between Eightfold and SuccessFactors is one example, where interoperability is table stakes. It's an expectation for the vendors to figure out how do we plug and play with one another, because no one owns the skills repository, sole domain and access that everything has to be sourced from. And with generative AI now, skills, content, and information will always exist everywhere else in a far greater depth than what any HR environment or talent environment or recruiting environment in and of itself is going to contain. So you have to source that much more broadly. So organizations are really trying to figure out what is that opportunity to them, and then it's incumbent on us as technology providers and certainly alongside our SI partners, how do we unravel all of that so it doesn't become a resource constraint, it doesn't become an economic drain on an organization to do the stitching and the plumbing. Right. I think most technology companies are now much more collaborative and opening up how we interoperate with one another. So we're spending a lot of time on those two topics.
Excellent.
Kristen, let me,
Yeah, absolutely.
Based on what Michael said, so gone are the days where the projects used to last years. We did this implementation in 7 months. The entire of starting both the SuccessFactors implementation and Eightfold globally, one go live globally. We didn't roll it out by country. We didn't roll it out by region. It was one big go live. We had the 2 ATSs running for about 2.5 months, of course, to sunset any candidates that were already in the workflow, and they don't get impacted. So it's, if there's prospect clients here that are looking at potentially what to do, you could get one of these systems stood up very fast, especially when they've got this partnerships like SuccessFactors and Eightfold have. It's like a plug and play. I remember when I sat with the CHRO and oversight, and he goes, "Who's this Eightfold? And how do they fit in this thing?" I said, "Well, think of it this way. Think of your laptop, that's SuccessFactors, and think of these USBs that you plug in there. That's Eightfold. I mean, as soon as you plug it in, they just start working."
Ooh, I got to use that. That's
Through it. And he's like, "Oh, okay." But that's pretty much how it was. I mean, these partnerships that have been built, it becomes seamless. So.
And Jackie, I know when we started out, we talked about the fact that the technology and the implementation of it could go fairly rapidly, at least in terms of some of the initiatives that we had done at Eaton before together. How did you think about what it was going to take to get the organization ready? What was important to you in terms of helping prepare the organization, but whether it be the recruiters, the hiring managers, the employees and managers as a whole? What was important on that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So we really started with our North Star, those priorities that I was sharing before, and it was all about communication, right? I will say the success of any implementation that I've ever been through has as much to do with successfully, launching the technology and getting it to stand up and do what it's supposed to do, but also communicating with the constituents, making sure that they understand, right? And this is our employee base of 90,000 people, lots of HR folks, right, with lots of opinions, right, and some very protective about old workflows and what they were doing versus what they're going to be, needing to do in the future. So communicating early and often with our HR leadership teams and with our business leaders. We have a number of different methodologies at Eaton to deliver, change to the organization. So, myself, Sai, my team, we stood up a workflow, if you will, that was all about change management and communications. Those people were out on the front lines communicating throughout the entire project. I don't think there was a month that went by that we weren't delivering some sort of update to the organization. And that really helped to get people excited and ready for the adoption and the change in the way that they were going to be working.
Yeah. Additionally, we also had Works Council representation, employee relations, data privacy, all part of the project. Because, they had to be educated of what's coming out there.
Right.
And you hear the word AI, and it would freak them out at that point. But we had to walk them through that journey, especially with the different work councils in Europe.
Yeah.
And what we were trying to do.
Yeah. And then just to add, we had I'll say kind of an 11th hour, little bit of an alarm around AI and the use of it, and we did need to make some configuration changes to, I'll say, align with, Eaton's risk tolerance around certain things, but it didn't impact the integrity of the tool and really the skills-based matching, which was, at the end of the day, really what we were trying to lift up. But it was that partnership that Sai was just mentioning. It was critically important.
And Michael, maybe if you could offer from an audience perspective, again, at the more macro level of what you're seeing in the market, what might be one thing that our audience members might think about if they're embarking on this journey for the first time?
AI is such a broad concept. When Elon Musk is talking about the world's going to end, Berkshire Hathaway's meeting this past weekend, they're talking about just the catastrophic potential impact. But they're missing the goodness of contextualizing AI from a business process perspective. And how can that continuously evolve, but done within the framework of ethics? Mm-hmm. One of the things that we see frequently absent from conversations around what I think is generally overused around AI, sometimes it's just reporting, and they're putting it under the banner, et cetera, but they're not wrapping it in with an ethical lens. And what does that actually mean as it aligns to the values of the organization, and continuously being vigorous around what is the potential impact and trying to gameplay or forecast that out? That's kind of a call to action or a reminder to everybody that context is something that we need to continue to incorporate, because the evolution that's happening in this space is happening at a pace that none of us can keep up with, let alone predict where it's going to go. So having some guardrails and boundaries, not to constrict, but at least to protect integrity of the organization is something that is a constant call that we've tried to put forward. It's a wrapper that's important.
Absolutely. Cy and Jackie, I'll ask you both. If you were looking back, or you are looking back now a year later on this journey, what's the one thing that you would have told yourself and told the organization at the time when we were starting out that you would encourage the teams to think about now, or that others might be well positioned to think about as they're starting on their journey? If they're sitting in your shoes a year, thinking about where they're going to be up here next year, maybe, what one piece of advice would you give them?
So I would say highly recommend, map your as-is flows, but be open to what the 2Bs are going to look like. And let those conversations drive of what your future processes will be like. So that's one. Two is think about the data that gets collected through it. So create your processes in a way that you've got the right data points that can help you later in any level of predictive or any level of analytical work that you need. Don't put processes in the middle and capture data points that you can potentially not use later. So that would be the two. The third part on it is it's a journey. So part of your change management for us, and we've always talked about it agile, and we always talk about it the crawl, walk, run component on it. Educate the community that you work with, educate your users, educate the leaders around that. It's a very common, walk, crawl, run in the software business, right? It's agile, we know about it. But in our manufacturing industry, it's not. So they're used to hey, day one, this thing should be running perfect.
Right.
And it's like, guys, gone are the days of having it 100% running day one versus saying, let's get 80% of something out there that you can start using and getting value out of it while we fine tune the last 20%. Versus do you want to wait another 9 months, a year before you get the product? So I think that part of the education journey was important.
Yeah.
It's an area that I believe maybe we could have worked on a little more within the organization. I think we felt like they may accept and adopt to change fast. And then, you've heard a lot this morning about the whole AI in the marketplace. And when you've got our legal groups on it, of course, their pendulum is always on the most safety side of it. It's like, AI, oh my God, biased. Well, we had a lot of the deep conversations that were talked about earlier on the stage internally.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would say my advice would be now I think is a great time, probably the best time that we've had to build a really good business case for evolving talent acquisition or just talent technologies and programs. I don't think there's an economist out there that would predict that this talent game is going to get any easier. And old, antiquated programs and technologies, right, are going to be I think a big cause for why companies are going to have a hard time attracting and selecting the right talent for the future. So I think right now is a great time to build a very good business case for a great return on the investment. And then, I would also say at the same time that you look at a technology, also take a deep look at your talent acquisition program or your talent programs in general. And ask yourself, and it's not even just yourself, it's your whole leadership team. Is this a modern experience? Is this the most simple way that we can get people into the organization, introduced to recruiters, and move through a selection workflow? Are there ways in which we can modernize the experience, we can move faster? Because if it takes too long, right, we're gonna lose candidates. So those would be two pieces of advice.
Can I add one more?
Please, go ahead.
If you're in the India and the China market, I would start that work on day one about how those marketplaces work, just because they work very different from the U.S. market or India,
Right.
And how you penetrate through those. So if you do have a base out in those two countries, start very early in the project and plan for it.
One thing that I would have is had very high expectation of your partners. Whether it's SAP, Oracle, Workday, whomever, from your platform perspective, we all have ecosystems, but we don't all necessarily interoperate seamlessly or proactively with those ecosystems. And it goes back to the originating point that I was making around interoperability and kind of demystifying how these things plug and play together. Because there's a lot of solution sets that are very complementary. Some overlap, but hold the vendors accountable. Us, Eightfold, others, to come to the table, and sometimes we give up piece parts in order to advance the sum of the whole. on behalf of what the customer is trying to accomplish. And that should be the expectation, is if there's overlap, well, you know what, let's get in a room and figure it out. Because ultimately, we are here as technology companies to serve customers, and you should never step back from that expectation and be vigorous about it. It's not easy. It's cultural change for all of us. We want to own everything on the technology landscape. You should only buy things from SAP, right? But the reality is that doesn't work, right? And that doesn't advance an organization's imperatives. So it's incumbent on us to open up and collaborate and cooperate in that type of manner. So always hold your technology partners to the highest of expectations. So don't step back from that.
Well, Jackie and Si, you've talked about this journey that we've been on together. What's next? Where do you go from here? I know that we often talk about that the go live is just really day zero and not the end of the journey, it's the start. Where are you headed next?
Yeah. Si and I talk about this all the time. I think, so for us, Eightfold gives us, it puts our foot in the door with this whole skills-based, movement. And I think, as we continue to evolve, our SAP Talent Hub system, our talent management system, we're looking at our performance management tools. I think we're going to apply all of the learnings that we get, all of the intelligence and information from the talent acquisition and the recruiting systems, and we're going to be looking at how that impacts the use of skills and technology with the rest of our talent management environment that we have today. We struggle at Eaton, as many companies do, with moving talent around the organization. I think Starbucks was talking about that, very kind of vertical, right, career path. We also at Eaton need to move candidates around from business to business, and we are quite diverse, right? We have an aerospace business, we have electrical businesses, we actually own a golf grip company, which people are like, I'm always amazed at. But in order for us to get at this talent, mobility issue that we have to take it down to skills, right? Because otherwise, if we're just looking at experiences on a resume, we're going to miss a big part of our population. So that's really the future for us. We're 2.5 months into our, life with Eightfold and SAP, and things are going well. So we're excited about the future.
Si, anything you would add from the technology journey? Where do you head next?
I just need Jackie's Amex card so I can keep spending, keep building for her. No, I think, Jackie hit it down on it. We do have to take a step back and look at our underlying data on it. I mean, everybody's going after skills, but for skills to really work, there's a foundation layer that needs to be set and standardized within your entity for it to then scale up, right? If you've got the same engineer with 7 different job titles on it, how does that work, Do we standardize some of those items, and how do we go through that? So that's a key piece of, housekeeping work that we have to go through to then define how do we take this out in the future on it. And then every vendor's out there marketing skills. I mean, ServiceNow, it's a case management system. They're talking about skills. It's like, how does skills and case management fit in together? But they're like, hey, we want to be in the race too. So I think that area of skills over the next, my guess, probably the next 12 to 18 months is going to narrow down. And there's going to be a few companies that are really going to do great at it. And that's what's going to help us get to the next level.
And Michael, where do you see the market going? Where's SAP going together in partnership with Eightfold in the future?
Yeah, I think it comes down to proactively understanding how we can continue to evolve the impact, not only of the skills of the individuals, but then cascading that forward. And the session before, we talked a little bit about DE&I. How do those skills actually translate down into impacting the communities that you serve and that you're in? So when SAP looks at what we're trying to do with our technology partners as well, it's how do we combine those efforts to make certain that we're bringing impact and evolution and creating opportunity. And so when we talk about like skills and identifying individuals' aspirations and trying to apply that towards how they bring impact, it's not just impact from a job perspective. We are leaning in. We're fortunate in the technology industry. A lot of organizations lean in very heavily, invest in giving back. I think that creates a tremendous opportunity to find different communities that we can impact, but then also different communities of skills, perspectives, talent that otherwise would never have been made available to us if we weren't in those communities trying to serve. So I think that's another thing that we're trying to do as an organization, organically, but then also making certain that we are pulling our ecosystem alongside us. We need to go faster, no doubt. We have 200 HXM ISV partners, right? How many of them are we jointly doing community impact with? I can count them on one hand, perhaps just a couple fingers. That's not fast enough. But I think as our aspiration when we talk about skills brings impact economically, it brings impact in our community, and we could all use a little bit of a goodness and uplift. So that's an area of focus for us as well.
Thank you, Michael. Well, Jackie, Cy, Michael, thank you so much for joining me on stage. It's been a privilege to be a part of the Eaton journey.
Yeah, thank
and I really appreciate you sharing your story.
We appreciate your partnership.